Hello, and welcome to another edition of Your County at Work, the show that brings you to the front lines of hardworking men and women of Newcastle County government. Today, I'm happy to tell you that Trinidad Navarro, Sheriff for Newcastle County, is here in the NCCTV studio today to talk about the latest happenings in his office. Thank you so much, Sheriff, for coming today. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm wonderful, thank you. Seems like we've been here before, but not here, but like we've been sitting talking before.
We sure have, yeah.
All right. So if you would tell our viewing audience what you do at your office.
Well, we have about 21 employees in the office, and one of the, everyone thinks sheriff, they think we're police officers.
Right.
And we can't stress enough that we're not cops. We do the work of the court. So anything that comes out of family court, chancery court, or court of common pleas, all the documents, they're filtered through my office, and then we filter those documents out to the community. So our deputies serve about 30,000 documents a year, and I'm proud to say that our number as far as our trips that we actually find people, it's about 80%, and it was much less than that years ago. And technology's better now. Our deputies have they have this program that allows them to map out where they're going to go. So they know when people may or may not be home. They work evenings, things like that. So we're really good now at finding people. But the technology is in place, and it was in place when I took over. We just had to turn on some of the buttons.
Right. I'm glad that you let the viewing audience know that you're not a police officer, and nothing bad about police officers, but I guess from like growing up, you watch cartoons and television and you see the sheriff and he's always going out arresting people. Yeah. So that's not what you do.
I was first elected, I kept hearing that. Oh, there's a new sheriff in town.
Right.
And some of the jokers would say, I shot the sheriff, but I didn't get the deputy. I heard all that stuff. But the reality is I was a police officer for 20 years. It's a young man's profession. I did that. I arrested people. I helped people who were oftentimes in the most difficult times of their lives, whether they were victims of domestic violence or children who were abused or drug dealers or drug abusers. We tried to help as many people as we could. But now I know that my job is no longer in law enforcement, and it's important that the community knows that, because when a sheriff comes to your door to hand you a document, and it's not always bad news, but when we come to your door, we're not police officers. So we have to be concerned about the safety of our deputies, because some states, sheriffs are the head law enforcement officer, and in some states around this area, people still see sheriffs as police. So we have to be sure that our deputies are trained and they know to be careful, but that they're not police officers.
Right. So you being a police officer, I guess your move to sheriff was, I want to say, an easy move because you're still helping people. So let's talk about, I remember last time we spoke, you shared about a lady that you helped get money back to her. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, we're still serving the public, but I'm not protecting them in the same way we did when I was a police officer. But one of the things that I'm most proud of since I've been in the office is we go after and try to find people who we owe money to. In other words, after we have a sheriff's sale, after we pay all the bills, whether it's the taxes or any liens or judgments against that property, when there's money left over, that money belongs to the rightful owner, not to the county, not to the state. So I actually go out and try to find these people so I can return money to them. And I know the other sheriffs in the state of Delaware don't do that, and I don't know if any other sheriff in the country is doing it. But it's the right thing to do. I can say that we've returned about $150,000 to people who were the rightful owners. And just the other day, I found a woman out west who we owed about $40,000 to. And you know what really made me feel good when I talked to her? Because I called and I found her daughter, had a cell phone, and she didn't. So I found her, and she got a hold of her mom. And when I spoke to her, she said, when I heard this from my daughter, I knew it was true. Because I remembered your name. Because she remembered reading my name in the news journal. And the reality is, when you're trying to return money to people, it's tough. Because who does it?
Right.
everyone thinks it's a scam. We reach out to individuals and say, look, your property at 123 Main Street was sold back in May of 2015, and there's excess proceeds. And sometimes you don't even get a chance to tell them, well, that person's not here, or because they've moved, because they've lost their property, it's hard to find them. So I use a computer search engine to try to find people so that we can return the money to them. And it's very gratifying, because what we do is once we determine who they are, we verify their identity, and then we do a check to make sure that they don't owe county taxes, or they don't have liens or judgments against them, or utilities, things of that nature, credit cards. But once we find out they don't, and everything is paid for, we write them a check. So they don't have to go back through the process of trying to get the money back from what we call project rightful owner. That's tough, because you have to hire an attorney. They have to do everything we've done all over again. And it's a very difficult process. So by cutting out all of that, after we've determined that they're free and clear, it makes it much easier for them. And then for folks who aren't so free and clear, maybe they have a credit card debt, or they moved and they didn't pay off their cable bill or electric bill, we'll pay that first. Okay. So sometimes there's not money left over, but we're giving them a fresh start. Right. So, the people who the money is owed to don't necessarily know that they're excess proceeds. So it could be anything from a court-ordered judgment to not paying your cable bill. So if there's money left over, we'll pay those first. And sometimes there's not money left, but it at least gets them with a bright line moving forward.
Most definitely. Let's talk about, you mentioned sheriff sales. Let's talk about when sheriff sales are and how someone's home gets up for sheriff sale.
Well, we actually hold the sale on the second Tuesday of every month. And I can tell you, when I first came into the office, it was an unprecedented time with the mortgage crisis. And we were setting up 350 properties to sell every month. And we actually had to turn sales away because we could only do so many. And I'm proud to say that we were able to do that without spending a lot of money with overtime. It really, really was taxing on the office. But we were able to accomplish it because we have a great staff. Stu Snyder's my chief deputy, and he's done a great job in the office as far as managing the workforce and overseeing things like overtime and sick usage and things like that. So we were able to accomplish all of those sales. During that time, the county was reaping the benefit of the 4% that we received back for each sale. But the reality is we'd rather keep people in their homes. And fortunately, the General Assembly wrote a bill that stopped, in essence, completely all of the sheriff sales for a couple months. And then what it did was it forced the mortgage holders to sit down with the companies to work out the mediation. And it also forced the companies to follow the rules. Right. Because they were skirting the rules there for a while. So we were able to confirm that they were doing everything that they needed to do before the sale. And then, unfortunately, in many cases, we still had to sell the properties. But today, we're only setting up about 100. So we know that the economy is doing better, and we know that people are able to pay their mortgages. We know that some companies are offering forbearances and working out deals where people are getting better rates, things of that nature. Because the truth is, we're all better off when people stay in their homes. Because we've seen, and I've heard complaints from people who live in communities where the house is abandoned. And the kids have thrown rocks through the windows, or vagrants have moved in, or no one's cutting the grass. So we all win when people stay in their homes. And we've seen that across the country, that the sales, the mortgage foreclosures, the tax munitions have dramatically increased over the last several years. And we're very happy that people are staying in their homes.
Most definitely. Where is your office located, and what are the times of the sheriff sales?
Well, our office is located at 800 North French Street. Our sheriff sales are held at 10 o'clock in the morning on the second Tuesday of the month, right in the city-county chambers. So some places in other parts of the country, they'll hold the sale right outside the property. Okay. You see that on television sometimes. You do. But no, we hold all of ours right there in council chambers. So one of the things that we did when we came into the office, we saw that the sale process itself wasn't very well organized. You know, someone could come in off the street, show us that they had $5,000 in good funds, because you can't bid on a property unless you show us that before the sale, but then they can get up and walk out. And so now everyone's registered. They have numbers like you see on television, you know, 325 or whatever. And so, but they also have to come in. They have to show us their identification. And this is for people who might be interested in coming to the sale. They have to show ID. They have to have $5,000. It used to be we take cash. We don't take cash anymore. That's a bad practice. We take certified checks. They have to have the certified funds. You know, if you buy a property, it's a tax sale, and most of those are in the city. And you can buy properties for just a couple $1,000s, but those properties are in bad shape. Right. And when I first heard that, I was like, man, this is wrong. This is, you know, how can we put people out of their homes for just a couple $1,000s? So I went out and checked to see what these properties look like, you know, to see if there were people still in their homes. And the sad truth is that these houses, for the most part, are abandoned. Okay. We're not evicting people from their homes. The people have walked away a long time ago, and drug dealers have moved in, or the places have been set on fire, things like that. So it actually is a good thing that we were able to sell these properties because the taxes weren't paid, makes the city whole, and then an investor will come in and clean up the place, whether they flip it or rent it. At least it's a property that's taken care of. So we're happy that we're able to help the community by selling properties. And then you think, well, you know, you're selling properties for people's homes. You're kicking them out, but in many cases, especially in the city, they're already abandoned.
What is the ratio from the banks coming in, taking the homes, the share of sales homes, opposed to actual people wanting to come and purchase the home?
Well, each month we have probably anywhere from 5 to 10 tax sales, and those are the properties that all the investors want to buy. Okay. Because they know that they're, say for example, the city of Wilmington's owed $4,500 for a sewer fee. They know that the city will start the opening bid at around that number. So when I first started, there was probably 5 or 6 investors who were interested in those properties. Well, word's gotten out. And now there's probably 20 or so investors who are trying to buy those 5 or 10 properties. So you'll see after the tax sales are over, a number of people will just leave. Okay. So the tax sales are different from the mortgage foreclosure sales. Those sales are primarily bought back by the bank, probably at a rate of about 90%, maybe even higher. Because the banks have, you know, obviously equitable interest in those properties. They're not selling them for, you know, $5,000 or $10,000. They're selling them for close to, or offering them for close to what the market would bear. So the investors don't have oftentimes $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 unless they know that property is something that they can flip. And they're out looking at all those properties. You can't go in, especially if they're occupied, but you can walk around, you can see whether it needs a new roof or windows. You know, you can see the AC unit that's outside, whether it looks like it's relatively new. So they still do, the investors do buy those properties, but not nearly at the rate they do the tax sales. Okay,
so prior to the sheriff's sale, there is a listing that people can obtain and go take a look at the homes and then come to the sheriff's sale.
Yeah, you used to have to buy that listing. We used to charge $10 for it, and then that's just another accounting issue when you have cash coming in. Now we offer the list online, so anybody can go and see it, or they can come into the office, and oftentimes we have people who don't have access to computers will just come in and we have the list and they can look at it that way. But most of the investors, not only do they have the list, but then they'll pull up all of the real estate information about everything from property taxes to whether or not there's any liens, because when you buy those properties, it's buyer beware. You know, it's when you buy it, you buy the whole lot. In other words, we've had incidents where a property went up for sale and the investor didn't go out and look, the house had burnt down. Oh, wow. So it was just a lot, but they didn't know it because they didn't do their homework, or they didn't know that it may have been subject to another mortgage because they didn't do their homework. So it's not something that you get into without doing your homework. It's not something you get into without having an attorney, because we've had people who have bought properties and then tried to have the sale set aside, And if it's an issue where the court made a mistake, then oftentimes that'll be granted. But if it's an issue where the investor made a mistake, you bought the property, it's yours. Right. And you brought all the headaches, and if there's liens and things like that, or if the property's burnt down.
So they need to do their due diligence.
You really do. It's not something that a person who doesn't know what they're doing, somebody who's trying to get into the business. You need to come to a sale. You need to talk to some of the other buyers. You need to talk to an attorney and educate yourself, because we have seen people who have, they want to bid on one property and they get caught up in the sale, and then they end up bidding on something else. And it's buyer beware. Once you purchase that property, it's yours.
Sure. Okay. Before we wrap up our segment, Sheriff, is there anything else that you would like to add?
Well, when we first went into the office, we had issues with legacy accounts. In other words, we had monies left over that at the time we didn't know where it belonged, and it was probably around $1 million. And we knew that it was most likely the percentage of the 4% fee that we get when we sell a property. We knew it was most likely taxes that went to a specific property. We knew, remember back when banks actually paid interest? Some of that money was interest. So we did an audit on that money, and we found that we were able to return probably half of it. The other $424,000, we actually wrote a check, handed it over to the county, and said, it's not our money. And instead of putting that in the big pile, the general fund, the big pile of money, we were able to work out a program for senior citizens that allowed them to apply for grants to pay for home improvements. Things like you needed a ramp or a new roof and things like that. We helped them pay for it. And we know it's successful. We knew that there was a long line of people looking to use the grants to make the improvements to their homes. So it's really proud of the fact that we were able to, it's easy for me to say, that we were able to help people, especially seniors who were, needed these improvements in their homes, but didn't have the money to do it.
Yes.
And as a police officer for years and years and years, I did programs with kids. We do an anti-bullying program, a cybersecurity program. We've done those probably to thousands of kids in Newcastle County, Maryland, and New Jersey, because word had gotten out that it was such a great program. So we went all over this tri-state area, presenting the message of anti-bullying and protecting yourself if you're on the computer. Because oftentimes we teach our kids not to talk to strangers, right?
Yes.
But they get on that computer and they'll talk to anyone.
Right.
And they don't know. They think that they're talking to a 15-year-old boy from Newcastle, when in reality is they're talking to a 40-year-old pervert who is trying to find kids using these certain engines and things like that, Snapchat and Instagram and things like that. People think that they're safe because you take a photograph and it's up and it's gone or whatever. But anyone can screenshot that photograph, and we need to educate our kids on it's not safe. Kids know not to talk to strangers, right? They know not to take candy from a stranger. Right. They know not to help someone who's looking for the lost puppy. But when we're behind that keyboard and that person on the other side, oftentimes isn't that young boy that they think they're talking to, a young girl they're talking to a predator. And so we've done those programs, like I said, throughout Newcastle County and as far away as Dover and other parts of Delaware and other states. And we know it works. We know the message gets out because the kids are engaged. They ask questions.
Yes.
And we're asked back, so we know it works. So we have those programs in the office. We do self-defense for senior citizens and scam alert for senior citizens because that's my background. I have the time to do it, and I love to do it.
All right. Thank you so very much. And on behalf of the County Executive, Tom Gordon, and all of us at Newcastle County, thank you for all the hard work that you do.
It's my pleasure.
All right. Okay, that brings us to a conclusion of another episode of Your County at Work. I hope you learned something today. Please keep in tune to NCCTV to learn more about your local government, Newcastle County. For County Executive Tom Gordon, Executive Producer Jim McDonald, Director Tony Prado, and NCCTV crew members Josue Ortega, Steve Berg, Lisa Lancaster, and Rob Paolo, thank you for watching. This is Waynna Dobson signing off until next time.